Cooking is a daily part of our lives, whether we're preparing food for ourselves at home or going to a restaurant to pay for someone else to cook for us. No other animal alive today is able to do that. We're so reliant on cooking that we can get sick if we eat certain foods raw, foods that used to be a natural part of our diet without cooking required. How did early humans discover how to do this? How did cooking help us grow as a species? The idea of cooking starts with fire, something well known to be a key detail in human evolution. Around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus, one of our hominin ancestors, began showing signs of shrinking teeth and digestive tracts, suggesting they had begun utilizing fire to cook their food. When humans first began using fire, it wasn't that they hit two sticks together and got lucky that they made a spark. They first took advantage of naturally formed fires, like wildfires for example, to keep themselves warm at night, cook food, and keep predators away. Then, after experimenting, they figured out they could create it themselves. The best evidence we have of controlled fire use dates back to 1 million years ago, meaning we know it's the most recent time that we could have started using fire. This evidence comes from South Africa in the Wonderwerk Cave, where evidence of ash deposits and burned bones were found too deep in the cave to have been carried by wildfire. Most scientists generally believe use of fire dates back to earlier than this, though, especially since fire usage is easier than controlled fire usage. There have been fire pits discovered that date back to 800,000 years ago, though it's difficult to say if they had created fire there or used them to maintain naturally formed fires. One fire pit in Europe, dating back to 400,000 years ago, was found to have pyrite remnants. One of the only uses we know of that pyrite serves is to create fire by striking it against a piece of flint. This is the oldest pit we've found that has evidence of fire creation. It's unknown exactly which of our ancestors is responsible for this, but the nearest hominin found in this region is Neanderthals. It was around this time that humans likely made cooking a normal part of eating, cooking in their meals daily. The discovery of fire changed human evolution. Fire gives food more calories, which means more energy and less hunting required, leaving more time for other activities than just pure survival. Cooked food is also much easier to eat, which has led to our jaws getting smaller. Our brains began growing since a larger brain needs more energy, and less space being taken up by strong jawbones allows more space in our heads. The next big milestone was the cultivation of agriculture. People have a lot of misconceptions about how humans began farming. In hunter-gatherer societies, they had a lot of knowledge about the plants around them. They would learn what time of year certain crops should be harvested, and with their knowledge of fire, they created controlled wildfires which would manage the land and promote growth of edible vegetation. It's likely that humans had the knowledge required to begin farming for long before any major attempts at it were pursued. The main reason they didn't at first is because foraging was much less labor-intensive than farming, allowing more time for leisure and sleep, while also getting the amount of nutrients needed in their daily diets. There may have also been certain types of small-scale farming in hunter-gatherer societies. The Neolithic period is when humans started to settle in the Fertile Crescent, given its name because the land was especially suitable for farming. And this new milestone in human prehistory became known as the Neolithic Revolution. There's also evidence that there were people in other parts of the world that had begun planting crops, such as in East Asia, Africa, and South America, then spread from these regions to around the world. It's likely that agriculture was utilized in these regions around the world, all seemingly around the same time because of the warming of the planet after the last ice age. In Africa and Southwest Asia, lower levels of rain led to droughts, killing plants and animals people in these areas relied on. This meant foraging was much more difficult. Since they couldn't rely on that anymore, they began using the information they had to plant crops themselves and settle in these areas to stay near their food sources. Even today, there are still groups of people who are hunter-gatherers because they didn't historically have the pressure to begin farming. As people planted crops, they also experimented with ways to cook their food. They found that if they take grains and grind them up, then mix them with water and cook them over fire, they could create a dough. At first, people were only making unleavened bread, which is hard and flat. It was in Egypt that they discovered how to make leavened bread, which is closer to the type of bread we eat today. Leavened bread is done by adding gas either before or during the baking process, which makes the bread softer and fluffier. Hearths and fire pits were the first places people would cook food. Ancient civilizations like the Romans and Egyptians would make ovens resembling modern pizza ovens, out of brick or stone. In medieval times, ovens were made of clay and would be built in the corner of a home or in their own building called a pit house. In colonial America, ovens were built into the wall and are often referred to as beehive-shaped. It was in 1892 when electric ovens were invented, which is the kind most of us today are familiar with. Then, in 1946, it was discovered that microwave radiation could cook food and microwave ovens were invented. Cooking utensils have a history of their own. Knives and spoons have the oldest history, both dating back to prehistoric times. Knives were used as both a weapon and as tools to cut food for eating and cooking. As technology got better and people figured out how to use different materials and refine the sharpness, knives went from being sharp pieces of rock to what we know today. People used pieces of wood or seashells as spoons. In fact, the word spoon comes from the Anglo-Saxon word spawn, meaning chip of wood. Forks originated not as an eating utensil, but as a cooking tool with two prongs until the Middle Ages, when they started being used for eating, particularly by the wealthy in the Middle East. Spoons also began being used by the wealthy and were made out of types of metal instead of wood. Chopsticks appeared about 5,000 years ago in China. It's likely that people would originally use two twigs to safely grab food while cooking it. The first cooking vessels like pots and pans were made out of clay. Around the Middle Ages, which seems to be a major period for cooking tool development, they started using metal to make these. Some of the oldest evidence we have of people seasoning their food dates back to 6,000 years ago. There were traces of garlic mustard seed and wild herbs found in cooking sites in Denmark and Germany. Salt was used 2,000 years before this, being used to preserve meat along with enhancing the flavor. Some people believe seasoning may trace back even further, as far as 13,000 years ago, as ancient people would mix a variety of different plants and herbs into their food. It can be hard to identify this as seasoning as opposed to simply preparing different foods together, and it really depends on what you consider to be seasoning. It's likely that the reason early humans started using spices and seasonings is because many of them, while not tasting good on their own, can help kill bacteria, especially in hotter climates. And if you notice, cultures that live in hotter climates are also known for spicier and more seasoned foods. Seasonings can also help fight infections, so people who enjoy the flavor may live longer and get sick less often. The date that people utilize seasonings gets pushed back further with new discoveries, so it's likely humans have been using spices longer than we think. Many herbs and leaves would leave little to no archaeological trace. We do know early humans, as early as 6 million years ago, would wrap food in leaves, which may have led to early usage of these leaves alongside cooking and eating food. Herbs and spices were also used for medicinal purposes, and considering that these benefits are known to apply when used in cooking, it's not surprising that people may have added these forms of medicine to their food. Cooked food changed us as a species forever. If it weren't for this discovery, it's likely we wouldn't be as intelligent as we are. A part of our daily lives, one of the most necessary aspects of survival, dates back to potentially over 1 million years, might extend through different species, yet we don't think about how incredible of a discovery it truly is. Cooking is one of the traits that makes us human. The next time you make yourself food, remember that your ancestors for generations have been doing the same exact thing, perfecting the skill and allowing you to live the life you do today. If you liked this video, be sure to leave a like. If you want to watch more science-related content, be sure to subscribe. If you have anything interesting to add, leave a comment below. If you were eating anything during this video, let me know what it was. I learned a lot making this video, and I think it's cool that cooking dates back to a previous species. I always imagined it was us who learned to control fire then start cooking, but that timeline is almost reversed. I hope you all learned something too. Thank you for watching.